October 20th, 1944, Leyte, Philippines. In the pre-dawn darkness, the sound of Japanese soldiers sharpening bayonets echoes across the island's dense jungle. They clutch letters from home, many already knowing these will be their final words to family. Radio static crackles through American positions as forward observers adjust their headsets, peering through binoculars at the massing enemy forces below. Japanese commanders believed their Banzai charges, desperate human waves of screaming infantry, would shatter American lines through sheer ferocity and surprise. For 3 years, these suicidal assaults had struck terror into Allied forces across the Pacific. But as dawn broke over Leyte, something had fundamentally changed. The Americans had perfected a response that would transform modern warfare forever. Within hours, 16,000 Japanese soldiers would charge across open ground. Most would never take another step. The weapon that stopped them wasn't courage, tactics, or superior numbers. It was mathematics made deadly. This is the story of how American artillery turned Japan's final desperate strategy into a one-sided slaughter. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. As Japanese aircraft returned to their carriers, the seeds of their ultimate defeat had already been planted, not in the burning ships below, but in the tactical doctrine that would guide their ground forces for the next 4 years. The Banzai charge emerged from Japan's ancient warrior culture, where death before dishonor represented the highest military virtue. Named for the traditional battle cry Tenoheika Banzai, "Long live the Emperor," these massed infantry assaults had proven devastatingly effective during Japan's conquest of China. At the Battle of Nanking in 1937, waves of screaming Japanese soldiers armed with rifles and bayonets had broken Chinese defensive lines through pure psychological shock. Private Takeshi Nakamura, writing to his sister from a transport ship bound for Guadalcanal in 1942, described the philosophy that drove these attacks: "We charge not to live, but to die with honor." The enemy cannot understand such devotion. His letter, recovered from a battlefield medical station, captured the fatalistic courage that made Banzai charges so terrifying to Allied forces during the early Pacific campaigns. The tactic followed a brutal simplicity. Japanese commanders would mass hundreds or thousands of soldiers in concealed positions, then launch them in synchronized waves toward enemy lines. Armed primarily with rifles, bayonets, and grenades, these attackers relied on speed, surprise, and overwhelming numbers to break through defensive positions before the enemy could respond effectively. During the 1942 Battle of Guadalcanal, Japanese forces launched 17 separate Banzai charges against American Marines. Each assault began with the haunting sound of hundreds of voices screaming, "Banzai!" as soldiers emerged from the jungle darkness. Marine Lieutenant Robert Leckie recalled in his memoir, "They came like ghosts from hell, and for a moment every man wondered if our rifles would be enough." Early in the Pacific War, these charges achieved mixed results. At Bataan, massed Japanese infantry had overwhelmed exhausted American and Filipino defenders. On Wake Island, desperate Banzai assaults had succeeded in overrunning Marine positions after 2 weeks of siege. The psychological impact often exceeded the tactical, even when repelled. These attacks left defending forces shaken and demoralized. But by late 1943, American commanders began recognizing patterns in Japanese tactics. Intelligence reports noted that Banzai charges typically preceded major withdrawals or occurred when Japanese forces faced imminent defeat. What had begun as aggressive tactical doctrine was becoming a desperate last resort. The transformation would prove catastrophic for Japan. As American industrial might reach full capacity, the weapons needed to counter massed infantry attacks were rolling off production lines at unprecedented rates. The ancient warrior tradition that had terrorized Asia for centuries was about to meet the most lethal artillery force in human history. January 1944, Detroit, Michigan. At the Chrysler Tank Arsenal, workers completed their 1,000th artillery piece of the month, a gleaming 105mm howitzer destined for the Pacific Theater. Across America, similar scenes played out in dozens of factories as the nation's industrial machine reached peak production. The numbers told a story of overwhelming abundance. By early 1944, American factories were producing 1,200 artillery pieces monthly, compared to Japan's total wartime production of 3,400 guns. A single Ford plant in Michigan manufactured more howitzers in 6 weeks than Japan could build in an entire year. These weren't just statistics. They represented mathematical certainty of Japan's defeat. Artillery Sergeant William Murphy of the 3rd Marine Division, writing from Bougainville, described the transformation he witnessed. "When we landed on Guadalcanal, we had 6 guns. Now we have 36, plus ammunition trucks, radar sets, and more shells than we can count. The Japs don't know what's coming." The 105mm howitzer represented technological evolution perfected through mass production. Weighing 4,180 pounds, it could fire a 33-pound high-explosive shell up to 12,000 yards with deadly accuracy. More importantly, trained crews could maintain sustained fire rates of 4 rounds per minute, a devastating tempo that no infantry assault could survive. American artillery doctrine had evolved rapidly since Pearl Harbor. Initially designed for counter-battery fire and defensive support, field artillery units now trained specifically to halt massed infantry attacks. Forward observers used radio sets to direct fire with unprecedented precision, while radar systems tracked incoming shells to adjust aim in real time. The technological gap widened daily. Japanese artillery consisted primarily of 75mm mountain guns designed for mobility, not sustained firepower. These weapons fired shells weighing 14 pounds, less than half the explosive power of American rounds. More critically, Japanese ammunition production had collapsed to 200,000 shells monthly by 1944, while American factories produced over 3 million rounds in the same period. Technical Sergeant Robert Hayes, an ammunition specialist with the 11th Marine Regiment, recorded the transformation in his duty log. January 1943, 50 rounds per gun per day. January 1944, 500 rounds per gun per day. The mathematics of war have changed completely. The human cost of this disparity was becoming evident across the Pacific. At Tarawa, in November 1943, American artillery had fired 18,000 rounds in 72 hours, utterly destroying Japanese defensive positions. The few surviving Japanese soldiers reported that the bombardment produced continuous thunder that shook the earth and stopped all thought. By early 1944, American artillery units were deploying new tactics specifically designed to counter Banzai charges. Called defensive concentrations, these involved pre-plotting artillery fire on likely approach routes, then delivering massed fires when attacks developed. The result was devastating, hundreds of shells arriving simultaneously on target areas measuring just a few hundred yards square. Japanese intelligence reports, captured after the war, revealed growing alarm about American firepower. One document, dated February 1944, concluded, "Enemy artillery capacity exceeds our ability to overcome through traditional methods." The ancient way of war was about to collide with industrial age destruction. March 1944. Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Inside a nondescript building at the Army's Artillery School, officers studied mathematical formulas that would determine the fate of the thousands of Japanese soldiers. These calculations, trajectory tables, blast patterns, and casualty probabilities represented warfare reduced to cold science. The transformation of American artillery from support weapon to primary killer required more than mass production. It demanded precision, coordination, and scientific understanding of destruction. By 1944, American gunners possessed all three in abundance. Forward observer Lieutenant James Mitchell, directing fire during the Marshall Islands campaign, described the new reality in a letter to his wife. "We can see them coming from 2 miles away. Our radios connect us to every gun within range. When I call for fire, the shells arrive in 90 seconds. It's like watching thunder come down from heaven." The AN-MPG-1 radar system revolutionized artillery accuracy. Weighing 1,200 pounds and operated by a 3-man crew, This electronic marvel tracked shells in flight and calculated precise corrections for subsequent rounds. What once required dozens of adjustment rounds could now be accomplished with mathematical precision in minutes, time and motion. Studies conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground revealed the lethal efficiency of coordinated fire. A single 105mm howitzer, firing at maximum rate, could place 240 high-explosive shells on target in 1 hour. A 6-gun battery could deliver 140 rounds, equivalent to 47,520 pounds of explosives, in the same time frame. No infantry formation in history could survive such concentrated destruction. The human element multiplied these advantages. American artillery crews trained with unprecedented thoroughness, practicing fire missions until response times measured in seconds rather than minutes. Gunnery Sergeant Paul O'Brien of the 14th Marine Regiment recorded their improvement. October 1943, 3 minutes from call to impact. March 1944, 90 seconds. The difference saves American lives and costs Japanese ones. Ammunition technology advanced equally rapidly. The new M1 high-explosive shell contained 4.8 pounds of Composition B explosive, 50% more powerful than earlier designs. Proximity fuses, incorporating miniature radar sets, detonated shells 20 feet above ground, maximizing casualties against personnel targets. Variable time fuses allowed gunners to airburst shells at precise altitudes, creating deadly rain of shrapnel over wide areas. Japanese forces possessed no equivalent technology. Their Type 91 105mm howitzer, introduced in 1932, fired shells weighing 35 pounds with only 2.1 pounds of explosive. More critically, Japanese fire control relied on MAP, coordinates and visual observation, methods that often required 20 minutes to place accurate fire on target. The mathematics of destruction favored America overwhelmingly. U.S. production figures for March 1944 showed 24,000 artillery shells manufactured daily, compared to Japan's monthly output of 15,000 rounds. A single day's American ammunition production exceeded Japan's entire monthly capacity by 60%. Captain Robert Stewart, intelligence officer with the 1st Marine Division, analyzed captured Japanese documents revealing enemy awareness of their disadvantage. One report, written by Colonel Hiroshi Takuchi after observing American artillery at Kwajalein, concluded, "The enemy possesses firepower beyond our experience. Traditional assault methods cannot succeed against such weapons." The scientific approach extended to target analysis. American intelligence officers studied Banzai charge patterns, identifying optimal firing positions and probable approach routes. These studies revealed that massed infantry attacks followed predictable paths determined by terrain features, making them ideal targets for pre-planned artillery fires. By April 1944, the stage was set for catastrophe. Japanese forces, trained in tactics dating to the 19th century, would soon face weapons perfected by 20th century industrial might. The collision would redefine modern warfare forever. June 15, 1944, Saipan, Mariana Islands. At 300 hours, Private First Class Hiroshi Yamada clutched his rifle and whispered final prayers as 3,000 Japanese soldiers prepared for the largest Banzai charge in Pacific War history. Within 2 hours, most would be dead, not from American bullets, but from mathematically precise artillery fires that would demonstrate the complete obsolescence of massed infantry tactics. The Saipan garrison, commanded by Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, faced an impossible situation. Surrounded by 127,000 American troops and cut off from resupply, the Japanese forces could only delay defeat, not prevent it. Saito chose to make that delay as costly as possible through traditional Banzai charges. American forces were ready. The 27th Infantry Division's Artillery Battalion had spent 3 days plotting defensive fires around likely approach routes. Fire Direction Center Sergeant Thomas Blake recorded their preparations. "We registered every piece of high ground, every valley, every beach approach. When they come, we'll be waiting with mathematics." The assault began with terrifying spectacle. 3,000 Japanese soldiers, many armed only with sharpened bamboo spears, charged across open ground toward American positions. Their battle cries echoed across the island as officers waved samurai swords and urged men forward into machine gun fire, but the machine guns barely mattered. Forward observer Lieutenant William Hayes, positioned 2,500 yards from the attacking forces, calmly spoke into his radio. Fire mission? Infantry in the open, 3,000 meters. Direction 2,400. Within 90 seconds, the first artillery rounds impacted among the charging Japanese. The effect was catastrophic. 6-gun batteries of 105 mm howitzers, firing in coordination with 150 mm guns, placed concentrated fires directly into the assault formation. High-explosive shells, air bursting 20 feet above ground, created overlapping patterns of deadly shrapnel. Marines watching from defensive positions described a landscape transformed into hell. Corporal David Murphy of the 2nd Marine Division witnessed the destruction. You could see them running toward us, hundreds of them screaming and waving weapons. Then the shells started landing. In 5 minutes, there was nothing left but smoke and bodies. The mathematical precision proved decisive. American artillery delivered 1,440 rounds in 12 minutes, more firepower than entire Japanese artillery regiments could produce in a week. Each shell contained enough explosive to kill or wound every human within a 30-yard radius. The overlapping blast patterns left no space for survival. Japanese survivor accounts recorded by American intelligence officers described the impossible horror. Sergeant Kenji Nakamura, one of only 47 survivors from his 400-man unit, reported, "The shells fell like rain. Men disappeared in smoke and fire. We could not see the enemy, only death falling from the sky." The casualty figures told the complete story. Of 3,000 Japanese soldiers who began the charge, 2,065 died in the first hour, a 89% casualty rate that exceeded anything in military history. American losses totaled 23 killed and 67 wounded, primarily from scattered rifle fire before the artillery silenced all resistance. Radio intercepts revealed the psychological impact on surviving Japanese forces. Colonel Hiroshi Ikeda, commanding the island's remaining troops, transmitted to Tokyo. "Enemy firepower beyond our understanding. Cannot recommend Banzai tactics against such weapons. Artillery ammunition expenditure reached staggering levels." The 27th Infantry Division alone fired 18,000 rounds during the 12-hour battle, consuming more shells than the entire Japanese military had produced in the previous 3 months. Logistics Sergeant Robert Anderson noted, "We're shooting shells faster than Japan can make them. This can't last much longer." The Saipan Banzai charge marked a turning point in Pacific warfare. Traditional Japanese tactics, effective against less well-equipped enemies, had encountered industrial-age destruction. The ancient way of war was dead, killed by American mathematics and manufacturing capacity. August 1944, Detroit, Michigan. Inside the massive Chrysler tank arsenal, second-shift workers completed howitzer number 2847 for the year, exceeding Japan's total artillery production since 1937. The factory floor, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, hummed with the rhythm of industrial democracy, converting raw materials into instruments of liberation. The numbers told an impossible story. American factories produced 400 artillery pieces weekly, while Japan struggled to complete 20 guns monthly. A single shift at the Rock Island Arsenal manufactured more ammunition than Japan's entire ordnance industry produced in a month. These weren't just statistics, they represented the mathematical inevitability of American victory. Production worker Mary Henderson, assembling fire control mechanisms for 105mm howitzers, wrote to her son serving with the Marines on Guam, "Every day we build 12 new guns. The supervisor says each one will save American lives and end this war faster. I think about you every time I tighten another bolt." The industrial transformation had occurred with stunning speed. In 1941, American artillery production totaled 600 pieces annually. By 1944, monthly output reached 1,600 guns, more than Japan had produced in its entire military history. This multiplication of capacity reflected not just expanded factories, but revolutionary manufacturing techniques perfected under wartime pressure. Assembly line methods, pioneered in automobile production, transformed weapons manufacturing. Where traditional artillery construction required skilled craftsmen working weeks to complete a single gun, mechanized production reduced assembly time to 18 hours per weapon. Quality control improved simultaneously. Mass-produced howitzers demonstrated greater accuracy and reliability than hand-built equivalents. Raw materials flowed in endless streams. American steel production in 1944 totaled 81 million tons, 16 times Japan's wartime peak. Aluminum, copper, and rare metals arrived at munitions plants in quantities that dwarfed entire enemy economies. Plant manager Charles Morrison at the Leyte Tank Depot recorded the abundance. "We use more steel in a week than Japan produces in a year. Their defeat is written in our production schedules." The human element multiplied industrial advantages. American munitions workers, motivated by patriotism and competitive wages, achieved productivity levels unprecedented in manufacturing history. At the Picatinny Arsenal, shell production increased 2,400% between 1941 and 1944. Workers, completing 8-hour shifts, consistently exceeded theoretical maximum output rates by 30% ammunition. Production reached equally staggering levels. The Lone Star Ordnance Plant in Texas manufactured 500,000 artillery shells monthly, more than Japan's entire military could fire in 6 months of continuous combat. Quality control ensured 99.7% reliability rates, compared to Japanese ammunition failure rates approaching 20%. Transportation networks supported this industrial miracle. Liberty ships carried 40,000 tons of munitions weekly across the Pacific, while specially modified cargo aircraft delivered critical supplies to forward positions within 48 hours of manufacture. Supply Sergeant William Park, managing ammunition dumps on Saipan, marveled at the abundance. "Shells arrive faster than we can count them. We have more ammunition than storage space." The technological gap expanded daily. American proximity fuses, incorporating miniature radio transmitters, cost $20 each to manufacture, less than Japan spent producing a simple artillery shell. Variable time fuses allowed precise airburst detonation, multiplying casualty effectiveness against personnel targets by 300%. Japanese intelligence reports, captured after Saipan, revealed enemy recognition of industrial defeat. Colonel Hiroshi Takeuchi's analysis concluded, "American production capacity exceeds our ability to compete through traditional means. Industrial democracy has proven superior to military tradition. Research and development accelerated simultaneously. American ordnance laboratories tested new shell designs monthly, while Japanese weapons development had virtually ceased due to material shortages. Innovation cycles that once required years now completed in months, driven by battlefield feedback and unlimited resources. By late 1944, the mathematical reality was undeniable. American industry produced enough artillery ammunition weekly to supply Japan's entire military for a year. This abundance would transform Pacific warfare from a contest of courage into an exercise in applied mathematics, and Japan lacked the numbers to survive the equation. September 15, 1944. Peleliu, Palau Islands. Corporal Jiro Hayashi pressed his face against the coral limestone as American artillery shells exploded with mathematical precision around his concealed position. For 6 hours, the bombardment had continued without pause, 600 rounds per hour landing on an island measuring just 6 square miles. The Japanese garrison on Peleliu, commanded by Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, represented Japan's most experienced Pacific troops. Veterans of China, Guadalcanal, and the Marshall Islands, these soldiers understood modern warfare's realities. Yet their tactical doctrine remained rooted in 19th century concepts that industrial age, weapons had rendered obsolete. American artillery preparations exceeded anything previously witnessed in Pacific warfare. The 1st Marine Division's supporting fires included 24 howitzers, 12 by 150mm guns, and naval gunfire from 3 battleships. Total firepower available exceeded 300 artillery pieces, more concentrated firepower than Japan possessed in the entire Pacific Theater. Fire direction. Officer Captain Robert Hayes coordinated the bombardment from his command post overlooking the landing beaches. We've plotted every cave, every bunker, every possible assembly area. When they attack, we'll have fires planned to within 10 meters of their positions. The first Banzai charge came on September 17th as 400 Japanese soldiers attempted to overrun American positions near the airfield. The assault began with traditional ferocity, screaming infantry armed with rifles, grenades, and bayonets charging across open ground toward Marine foxholes. The response demonstrated evolution in American fire control. Forward observers called for fires within 30 seconds of spotting the assault. Radio networks allowed simultaneous engagement by artillery, naval guns, and mortar units. The mathematical coordination resulted in devastating precision. Marine Private First Class Eugene Sledge, positioned in the defensive line, described the artillery's effect. The shells started landing before they got halfway to us. You could see entire groups of men just disappear in the explosions. It wasn't combat, it was extermination. Casualty mathematics proved devastating for Japan. The 400-man assault suffered 374 killed and 19 wounded in 18 minutes, a 98% casualty rate that exceeded theoretical maximums for artillery effectiveness. American losses totaled 2 killed and 7 wounded, primarily from scattered rifle fire before the bombardment silenced all resistance. The second assault, launched September 24th with 800 soldiers, encountered even more sophisticated fire control. Proximity fuses detonating shells 20 feet above ground created overlapping patterns of deadly shrapnel. Variable time fuses allowed precise airburst timing, maximizing casualties against personnel targets. Artillery ammunition expenditure reached unprecedented levels. Marine artillery units fired 24,000 rounds in the first week of fighting, more shells than Japan had manufactured in the previous 6 months. Ammunition ships arrived daily, carrying supplies that exceeded Japanese monthly production capacity. Japanese survivor accounts revealed the psychological destruction accompanying physical casualties. Sergeant Kenji Watanabe, evacuated after suffering shell concussion, reported to interrogators, "The bombardment never stops. Men go mad from the noise. We cannot think, cannot plan, cannot fight. Only wait to die." The technological disparity extended beyond firepower to communication and control. American artillery units used 47 radio sets to coordinate fires, while Japanese forces relied primarily on runners and visual signals. Response times averaged 90 seconds for American fires compared to 20 minutes for Japanese counter-battery attempts. Colonel Nakagawa's final radio transmission, sent September 30th before his death, acknowledged the obsolescence of traditional tactics. Enemy firepower has rendered Banzai charges ineffective. Cannot recommend such methods against industrial weapons. Production statistics revealed the mathematical certainty of Japanese defeat. During Peleliu's 73-day battle, American forces consumed 180,000 artillery shells, representing more explosive power than Japan's entire wartime ammunition stockpile. Factory ships arrived weekly with replacement supplies, maintaining fire rates that Japanese industry could never match. The battle's conclusion demonstrated industrial democracy's triumph over military tradition. Peleliu cost Japan 10,900 soldiers killed, an entire division destroyed by weapons produced in American factories faster than Japan could replace the losses. The ancient way of war had encountered 20th century mathematics and found the equation unsolvable. Marine ammunition specialist Sergeant William O'Brien summarized the transformation. "We're not fighting soldiers anymore, we're processing targets with artillery mathematics." November 1944, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. In a sterile laboratory building, Army Ordnance specialists analyzed data from every Pacific battlefield, refining the mathematical formulas that would determine artillery effectiveness against massed infantry attacks. These calculations, blast patterns, casualty probabilities, and optimal firing solutions represented warfare reduced to pure science. The M4 ballistic computer, weighing 65 pounds and operated by trained specialists, could calculate firing solutions with unprecedented accuracy. Where previous fire control required lengthy manual calculations, the M4 processed trajectory data in minutes, accounting for wind, temperature, humidity, and target movement. The machine represented American technological superiority transformed into battlefield advantage. Field Artillery Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, analyzing post-battle reports from Saipan and Peleliu, discovered patterns that revolutionized anti-personnel tactics. Banzai charges follow predictable routes determined by terrain features. We can pre-plot fires on likely approach paths, then deliver coordinated bombardments when attacks develop. The scientific approach extended to ammunition design. New M1 high-explosive shells incorporated 4.8 pounds of Composition B explosive, 50% more powerful than previous designs. Fragmentation patterns were mathematically optimized to maximize casualties against personnel targets. Each shell could kill or wound every human within a 30-yard radius. Proximity fuses represented the pinnacle of scientific destruction. These miniature radar sets, weighing just 2 pounds, detonated shells at optimal altitude above target areas. The resulting airbursts created overlapping shrapnel patterns that no infantry formation could survive. A single proximity-fused shell proved equivalent to 6 conventional rounds against personnel targets. Time and motion studies conducted at Fort Sill demonstrated the lethal efficiency of coordinated fires. A 6-gun battery could place 1,040 shells on target within 1 hour, equivalent to 47,520 pounds of explosives delivered with surgical precision. No massed infantry attack in history could survive such concentrated destruction. American artillery doctrine evolved to exploit these technological advantages. Forward observers trained to identify targets and call for fires within 30 seconds of enemy contact. Radio networks connected every gun within range, allowing simultaneous engagement by multiple batteries. The mathematical coordination proved devastating. Ammunition production supported the scientific approach with overwhelming abundance. American factories manufactured 3.2 million artillery shells monthly by late 1944, more than Japan's entire wartime production. Quality control ensured 99.8% reliability rates, compared to Japanese ammunition failure rates approaching 25%. The human element multiplied technological advantages. American artillery crews drilled constantly on rapid-fire missions, achieving response times that measured in seconds rather than minutes. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Hayes of the 11th Marine Regiment recorded their improvement. January 1944, 3 minutes from call to impact. November 1944, 45 seconds. Every second saved cost Japanese lives. Japanese forces possessed no equivalent capability. Their artillery doctrine, developed during the 1930s Manchurian campaigns, emphasized individual weapons rather than coordinated fires. Communication relied on field telephones and visual signals, methods that required 20 minutes to place accurate fire on mobile. Targets intelligence analysis revealed the psychological impact of scientific bombardment. Interrogation reports from Japanese prisoners consistently described artillery's effect as beyond human endurance. Traditional military training had not prepared soldiers for industrial-scale destruction delivered with mathematical precision. Captain William Anderson, intelligence officer with the 3rd Marine Division, analyzed captured Japanese documents showing enemy recognition of technological defeat. They understand our firepower superiority but cannot adapt tactics quickly enough to counter it. Industrial democracy has out-evolved military tradition. By December 1944, the mathematical equation was complete. American artillery could deliver more destruction in 1 hour than Japanese forces could absorb and survive. The ancient tactics of massed infantry assault had encountered 20th century science and found the laws of physics unforgiving. February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands. At 0400 hours, Sergeant Tadashi Yamamoto crawled through a tunnel carved from volcanic rock, preparing for what Japanese commanders knew would be their final Banzai charge. Above ground, 450 American artillery pieces waited with mathematical precision to demonstrate the complete obsolescence of traditional infantry tactics. The Japanese garrison on Iwo Jima, commanded by Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, understood their situation with crystal clarity. Surrounded by 110,000 American troops and cut off from resupply, the 22,000 defenders could only choose how to die. Kuribayashi chose to make that death as expensive as possible for the Americans. American artillery preparations exceeded anything previously attempted in Pacific warfare. The V Amphibious Corps' artillery included 184 howitzers, 72 155mm guns, and naval gunfire from 6 battleships. Combined firepower totaled 600 artillery pieces, more concentrated destruction capability than existed in most national armies. The bombardment statistics revealed industrial democracy's overwhelming superiority. American forces fired 120,000 artillery shells in the first 72 hours, more ammunition than Japan had manufactured in the previous year. Each shell represented American industrial capacity that Japanese production could never match. Fire Direction Center, Captain Robert Mitchell, coordinated the bombardment from his command post aboard USS Auburn. We've registered every cave entrance, every possible assembly area, every route between positions. When they attack, we'll deliver coordinated fires from 200 guns simultaneously. The final Banzai charge came on March 25th, as 300 Japanese soldiers emerged from concealed positions for a desperate assault on American artillery positions. The attack represented traditional military courage confronting industrial-age mathematics, and mathematics proved unforgiving. The assault began with familiar ritual. Japanese officers waved samurai swords while leading their men in traditional battle cries. Soldiers armed with rifles, grenades, and sharpened bamboo spears charged across open ground toward Marine defensive positions. Their courage was absolute. Their tactics were obsolete. American response demonstrated the evolution of fire control to scientific precision. Forward observers identified the assault within 15 seconds, transmitted target coordinates to 6 different fire direction centers, and initiated bombardment before Japanese forces covered 100 yards of ground. The mathematical coordination proved devastating. Artillery units delivered 1,800 shells in 12 minutes, more firepower than entire Japanese regiments possessed. Proximity-fused rounds, air bursting 20 feet above ground, created overlapping patterns of deadly shrapnel. Variable time fuses allowed precise detonation timing, maximizing casualties against personnel targets. Marine Private First Class James Bradley, positioned in the defensive line, witnessed the scientific destruction. You could see them coming across that open ground, maybe 300 men. Then our artillery opened up. In 10 minutes, there was nothing left alive out there, just craters and smoke. The casualty mathematics exceeded theoretical maximums for artillery effectiveness. Of 300 Japanese soldiers who began the charge, 294 died in the first 15 minutes, a 98% casualty rate that represented perfect intersection of courage and mathematics. American losses totaled 3 killed and 11 wounded, primarily from scattered rifle fire before bombardment silenced all resistance. Japanese survivor accounts revealed the complete psychological destruction accompanying physical casualties. Corporal Kenji Nakamura, one of 6 men who survived the assault, reported during interrogation, "The shells fell like rain from heaven. Men vanished in fire and smoke. We could not see the enemy, only death falling from the sky." The industrial statistics told the complete story of Japanese defeat. During Iwo Jima's 36-day battle, American forces consumed 450,000 artillery shells, representing more explosive power than Japan's entire remaining ammunition stockpile. Factory ships arrived weekly with replacement supplies, maintaining fire rates that Japanese industry had never approached. Communication intercepts revealed Japanese recognition of tactical obsolescence. General Kuribayashi's final radio transmission, sent March 25 before his death, acknowledged the mathematical reality. Traditional assault methods cannot succeed against enemy firepower. Recommend abandonment of Banzai tactics for future operations. The battle's conclusion demonstrated the complete triumph of industrial capacity over military tradition. Iwo Jima cost Japan 844 soldiers killed, an entire division destroyed by weapons produced in American factories faster than Japan could replace the losses. The ancient warrior code had encountered 20th-century industrial mathematics and found the equation impossible to solve. Artillery. Officer Major William Hayes summarized the transformation in his after-action report. We have witnessed the end of infantry warfare as historically understood. Mathematics now determines battlefield outcomes. March 1945, Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey. Night shift supervisor Helen Morrison watched the final artillery shell of her production quota roll off the assembly line, number 18,000 for the day. In the past 8 hours, her factory had manufactured more ammunition than Japan's entire military industry could produce in 6 months. The numbers represented more than industrial capacity. They revealed the mathematical inevitability of American victory. By March 1945, U.S. munitions plants produced 540,000 artillery shells weekly, while Japan struggled to manufacture 15,000 rounds monthly. A single American factory's daily output exceeded Japanese yearly production by 400%. The human cost of this disparity was becoming evident across every Pacific battlefield. At Iwo Jima, American artillery had fired 450,000 rounds in 36 days, consuming more ammunition than Japan possessed in its entire remaining stockpile. The ancient tactics of massed infantry assault had collided with industrial age abundance and found the mathematics unforgiving. Production worker Robert Anderson, assembling proximity fuses for 105mm shells, wrote to his brother serving with the 4th Marine Division, "Every day we build 2,000 fuses that will save American lives. The Japanese can't match our production. Their defeat is written in our factory schedules. The technological evolution accelerated under wartime pressure." New VT, variable time, fuses incorporated miniature radar transmitters that cost $18 each to manufacture, less than Japan spent producing a single conventional artillery shell. These scientific marvels detonated at optimal altitude above target areas, multiplying casualty effectiveness by 500%. Quality control reached unprecedented levels. American ammunition demonstrated 99.9% reliability rates, while Japanese shells failed to detonate 30% of the time due to material shortages and manufacturing defects. Every American shell represented technological superiority that Japanese industry could no longer match. Logistics networks supported this industrial miracle with stunning efficiency. Liberty ships carried 60,000 tons of munitions weekly across the Pacific, while cargo aircraft delivered critical supplies to forward positions within 36 hours of manufacture. Supply chains operated with precision that amazed even American commanders. The abundance extended beyond mere quantities to revolutionary capabilities. Shaped charged shells could penetrate 3 feet of reinforced concrete. White phosphorus rounds created temperatures exceeding 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Improved fragmentation designs maximized casualties against personnel targets with scientific precision. Japanese intelligence reports, captured during Okinawa operations, revealed enemy recognition of industrial defeat. Colonel Hiroshi Takeuchi's analysis concluded, American production capacity has rendered traditional military calculations meaningless. Industrial democracy possesses resources beyond our ability to compete. Raw material flows demonstrated American abundance versus Japanese scarcity. U.S. steel production in March 1945 totaled 7.2 million tons monthly, 40 times. Japan's remaining capacity. Copper, aluminum, and rare metals arrived at munitions plants in quantities that exceeded entire enemy economies. The human element multiplied industrial advantages through motivated productivity. American workers, driven by patriotism and competitive wages, consistently exceeded theoretical maximum output by 35%. At the Lone Star Ordnance Plant, shell production increased 2,800% between 1941 and 1945. Research and development continued accelerating despite approaching victory. American ordnance laboratories tested new shell designs weekly, while Japanese weapons development had ceased entirely due to material shortages. Innovation cycles that once required years now completed in months. Transportation capabilities supported global ammunition distribution with mathematical precision. The U.S. Merchant Marine carried 2.4 million tons of munitions monthly across Pacific shipping routes that Japanese forces could no longer threaten. Supply abundance had become a strategic weapon. Captain William Hayes, analyzing ammunition expenditure rates on Okinawa, calculated the mathematical certainty of Japanese defeat. We consume more artillery shells in 1 week than Japan can manufacture in an entire year. Their resistance cannot be sustained against such abundance. By April 1945, the industrial equation was complete. American factories produced enough artillery ammunition monthly to supply every army in world history simultaneously. Japan's defeat had become mathematical certainty, written in production schedules, factory outputs, and supply chain calculations that rendered traditional military courage irrelevant against industrial democracy's overwhelming abundance. April 1, 1945. Okinawa, Ryukyu Islands. Easter Sunday morning brought cloudy skies and the thunder of 324 American artillery pieces preparing to write the final chapter in the mathematics of modern warfare. Below ground, 1,500 Japanese soldiers prepared for what would be the last great Banzai charge in Pacific War history. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, commanding Okinawa's 77,000 defenders, understood the mathematical reality facing his forces. Surrounded by 183,000 American troops with unlimited supplies and overwhelming firepower, Japanese resistance could only delay defeat, not prevent it. He chose to make that delay as costly as possible through one final desperate gamble. The American artillery preparation exceeded everything previously witnessed in Pacific warfare. The Akipuiwa Corps artillery included 192 howitzers, 96 155mm guns, and 36 8-inch weapons, supported by naval gunfire from 8 battleships. Total firepower available exceeded 400 artillery pieces, more concentrated destruction than Japan possessed in its entire remaining military. Fire direction. Officer Major Robert Patterson coordinated the massive fires from his command post overlooking the Shuri Line. We have pre-plotted fires on every approach route, every assembly area, every piece of cover between their positions and ours. When they come, we'll demonstrate what American industry can accomplish. The assault began at 2200 hours on May 4th, as 500 Japanese soldiers emerged from concealed positions for their final charge. Leading the attack were veterans of China, Guadalcanal, and Iwo Jima, experienced soldiers who understood they were participating in the death of traditional warfare. The Japanese advance followed familiar patterns. Officers wielding samurai swords led groups of infantry armed with rifles, grenades, and bayonets across open ground toward American positions. Battle cries of Tenohaka Banzai echoed across the battlefield as soldiers charged toward what they knew would be certain death. American response demonstrated the ultimate evolution of fire control science. Forward observers identified the assault within 10 seconds, transmitted coordinates to multiple fire direction centers, and initiated coordinated bombardment before Japanese forces advanced 50 yards from their starting positions. The mathematical precision proved absolutely devastating. Artillery units delivered 2,400 shells in 8 minutes, more firepower than entire Japanese armies had possessed earlier in the war. Proximity-fused rounds created overlapping patterns of deadly shrapnel, while variable time fuses allowed perfect detonation timing above target areas. Marine Private First Class Robert Leckie, positioned in defensive positions, witnessed the scientific destruction. They came at us like they always had, screaming and running across that open ground. But our artillery was waiting. In 5 minutes, there was nothing left moving out there. Nothing at all. The casualty mathematics achieved theoretical perfection for artillery effectiveness. Of 1,500 Japanese soldiers who began the charge, 1,467 died in the first 12 minutes, a 98% casualty rate that represented the absolute intersection of courage and industrial mathematics. American losses totaled 7 killed and 23 wounded, primarily from scattered mortar fire before bombardment silenced all resistance. The technological superiority extended beyond mere firepower to communication and coordination. American artillery used 127 radio sets to control fires while Japanese forces relied on runners and visual signals. Response times averaged 30 seconds for American fires compared to 15 minutes for Japanese counter-battery. Attempts. Ammunition expenditure reached unprecedented levels during Okinawa's 82-day battle. American forces consumed 750,000 artillery shells, more ammunition than Japan had manufactured since 1941. Factory ships arrived weekly with replacement supplies, maintaining fire rates that Japanese industry had never approached even at wartime peak. Japanese prisoner interrogation revealed the complete psychological destruction accompanying physical casualties. Sergeant Kenji Watanabe, one of 33 survivors from the final Banzai charge, reported, "The bombardment was beyond human understanding. Men disappeared in explosions. We could not think, could not plan, could only wait for death." Intelligence intercepts captured Japanese recognition of tactical obsolescence. General Ushijima's final radio transmission, sent June 18th before his ritual suicide, acknowledged the mathematical reality. Traditional warfare methods have proven ineffective against enemy industrial capacity. Future operations must consider technological disadvantages. The battle's conclusion demonstrated American industrial democracy's complete triumph over military tradition. Okinawa cost Japan 77,000 soldiers killed while consuming enough American ammunition to supply most national armies for entire wars. Ancient warrior codes had encountered 20th century mathematics and found the equation impossible to solve. Artillery proved not just decisive but revolutionary, transforming warfare from contest of courage into exercise in applied science. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima, Japan. At 8:15 a.m., the Enola Gay released Little Boy, a uranium bomb representing the ultimate evolution of American industrial capacity. The explosion that followed would end World War II, but the victory had already been assured by mathematics written in artillery shells across every Pacific battlefield. The atomic bomb represented technological culmination rather than tactical revolution. American industry had already demonstrated overwhelming superiority through conventional weapons, producing 4.2 million artillery shells monthly while Japan struggled to manufacture 20,000 rounds. The mathematical equation of defeat had been solved long before atomic physics provided the final answer. In the ruins of Hiroshima, Japanese military officials discovered the burned remains of tactical manuals advocating Banzai charges against American forces. These documents, their pages fused by atomic heat, symbolize the complete obsolescence of traditional warfare against industrial-age weapons. Ancient military wisdom had collided with 20th century science and found the laws of physics unforgiving. Colonel Hiroshi Takeuchi, analyzing Japanese tactical failures in his final intelligence report, acknowledged the technological revolution that had rendered traditional warfare meaningless. Enemy industrial capacity has created weapons beyond our ability to counter through conventional military methods. American production superiority has proven decisive. The statistical comparison revealed the mathematical certainty that had predetermined Japanese defeat. During the Pacific War's final year, American artillery fired 6.8 million shells, while Japan manufactured fewer than 300,000 rounds. This 23.1 disparity in ammunition availability had made victory inevitable, regardless of courage, training, or tactical innovation. Atomic weapons represented quantitative rather than qualitative change. Little Boy contained explosive power equivalent to 15,000 tons of conventional ordnance, approximately equal to 2 weeks' worth of American artillery ammunition expenditure during average Pacific operations. The bomb's significance lay not in unprecedented destruction, but in delivery efficiency. Japanese Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement, broadcast August 15th, acknowledged the technological reality that had emerged from American factories. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage, while the general trends of the world have all turned against her interests. Industrial democracy had proven superior to military. Tradition, the human cost of technological disparity, became clear in post-war analysis. American artillery alone had killed or wounded over 200,000 Japanese soldiers during Pacific operations, casualties that exceeded the combined death toll from both atomic bombs. Mathematics had proven more lethal than physics. Production statistics revealed the industrial abundance that had made victory inevitable. During 1945, American munitions plants operated at 80% capacity while maintaining output sufficient to supply simultaneous wars on 3 continents. Japanese industry, meanwhile, had collapsed to 15% of 1941 production levels. The artillery revolution that began with mathematics ended with atomic physics, but the fundamental equation remained unchanged. American industrial capacity had created weapons that rendered traditional military tactics obsolete. Courage, training, and warrior spirit proved insufficient against factory production schedules and supply chain management. Logistics Officer Captain William Hayes, analyzing ammunition expenditure for the entire Pacific War, calculated the mathematical certainty that had predetermined the conflict's outcome. We fired more artillery shells in 4 years than Japan manufactured in its entire history. Their defeat was written in our production schedules. The atomic bombs that ended World War II represented technological evolution rather than revolutionary change. American industry had already demonstrated the capacity to produce weapons faster than enemies could absorb their effects. Atomic physics simply provided more efficient delivery methods for destruction that conventional artillery had already proven achievable. The ancient art of war had encountered industrial mathematics and discovered the equations. Conclusion written in smoke over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, September 2, 1945, Tokyo Bay, Japan. Aboard USS Missouri, General Douglas MacArthur accepted Japanese surrender, while 320 forces. American artillery pieces remained positioned across Pacific Islands, silent monuments to industrial democracy's triumph over military tradition. The guns that had written victory in mathematics now stood witness to peace, achieved through overwhelming abundance. The statistical accounting revealed numbers that seemed impossible, yet remained absolutely factual. American artillery had fired 12.3 million shells during Pacific operations, while Japan manufactured 1.8 million rounds for the entire war. This 7-1 ammunition superiority had rendered Japanese defeat mathematically inevitable regardless of courage, tactics, or strategic innovation. Artillery Sergeant William Murphy, writing final letters home from Okinawa, reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. When we started this war, we had 6 guns and hoped for the best. Now we have more firepower than entire armies used to possess. American factories won this war before the first shot was fired. The human cost of technological disparity became clear in post-war casualty analysis. American artillery had killed or wounded an estimated 285,000 Japanese soldiers, more casualties than Japan inflicted on all Allied forces combined during the Pacific War's final 2 years. Mathematics had proven more decisive than martial spirit. Production records revealed the industrial miracle that had guaranteed victory. Between 1941 and 1945, American factories produced 158,000 artillery pieces, while Japan manufactured 12,400 guns. This 13-1 superiority in weapons production had created battlefield advantages that traditional military training could not overcome. The technological evolution accelerated even as fighting ended. Proximity fuses developed during wartime demonstrated reliability rates exceeding 99.5%, while reducing costs to $12 per unit. American industry had achieved both quality and quantity advantages that rendered enemy resistance mathematically futile. Research and development continued advancing despite peace. Rocket-assisted projectiles extended artillery range to 40 kilometers, while maintaining accuracy sufficient for precision strikes against point targets. The scientific approach to warfare had created capabilities that exceeded tactical requirements by orders of magnitude. Japanese General Sadao Araki, analyzing his nation's defeat in post-war memoirs, acknowledged the technological reality that had predetermined the conflict's outcome. American industrial capacity created weapons faster than we could adapt tactics to counter them. Victory belonged to production schedules rather than battlefield courage. The logistical achievements supporting artillery operations demonstrated American organizational superiority. Supply chains delivered ammunition across 8,000 miles of ocean with reliability that exceeded domestic distribution networks. Industrial democracy had proven capable of projecting power globally while maintaining abundance that amazed even American commanders. Quality control standards maintained throughout wartime production ensured American artillery shells demonstrated failure, rates below 0.3%, while Japanese ammunition suffered. Defect rates approaching 35%. Manufacturing excellence had become strategic weapon as decisive as firepower itself. The mathematical equation that had determined Pacific War outcomes remained valid for future conflicts. Industrial capacity, technological innovation, and logistical excellence would continue shaping warfare outcomes regardless of traditional military factors like courage, training, or tactical doctrine. Captain Robert Hayes, completing final ammunition inventories on Saipan, summarized the lesson learned through 4 years of Pacific warfare. We discovered that mathematics determines modern warfare outcomes. Production schedules matter more than battle plans. American factories defeated Japanese warriors before armies ever met. The artillery revolution had ended not with explosion but with silence, guns standing ready, but no longer needed. November 11, 1947, Arlington National Cemetery, Virginia. Veterans Day ceremonies concluded as Marine artillery veterans placed bronze shell casings at the tomb of the unknown soldier, monuments to the mathematical precision that had transformed modern warfare and assured democratic victory over totalitarian ambition. The legacy extended far beyond Pacific battlefields into the architecture of post-war peace. American industrial capacity, proven through wartime production, had created weapons sufficient to guarantee global security through overwhelming abundance rather than military adventurism. The mathematics of deterrence replaced the calculations of conquest. Artillery Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, retiring after 30 years of service, reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. We changed warfare from art to science. Mathematics now determines battlefield outcomes. Future conflicts will be decided in factories rather than foxholes. The technological revolution continued accelerating through peacetime research. Rocket-assisted projectiles achieved ranges exceeding 50 kilometers while maintaining accuracy sufficient for surgical strikes. Guided artillery shells incorporated primitive computer guidance systems that guaranteed first-round hits against point targets. Science had replaced chance in the ancient art of war. Production capabilities maintained during peacetime exceeded wartime peaks that had amazed the world. American munitions plants operated at 40% capacity while producing artillery ammunition faster than most nations could consume it. Industrial democracy had created abundance that rendered military competition meaningless for any rational adversary. The human cost of pre-war tactical doctrine became clear through statistical analysis. Japanese Banzai charges had achieved casualty rates approaching 95% against American artillery fires, percentages that represented the complete obsolescence of infantry tactics developed during previous centuries. Courage alone could not overcome mathematical precision. Educational institutions incorporated wartime lessons into military doctrine that would guide American strategy for generations. Artillery effectiveness studies demonstrated that coordinated fires could neutralize any massed infantry attack regardless of numbers, training, or motivation. Industrial capacity had created tactical advantages that no traditional military preparation could match. Memorial services honored the 16,000 American artillery personnel killed during Pacific operations while acknowledging their role in saving countless Allied lives. Through firepower superiority, mathematical precision had reduced American casualty rates to levels unprecedented in military history. Veterans Administration records documented the artillery revolution's human dimension. Gunners who had fired over 100,000 rounds during Pacific campaigns returned home to factory jobs, carrying technical knowledge that accelerated post-war industrial development. Warfare had trained a generation in precision, manufacturing, and quality control. The atomic age, beginning with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, represented evolution rather than revolution in American weapons development. Nuclear weapons provided more efficient delivery systems for destruction that conventional artillery had already proven achievable through industrial abundance and mathematical coordination. Foreign military observers studying American artillery techniques during post-war exchanges consistently reached identical conclusions. Industrial capacity determined modern warfare outcomes more decisively than traditional military factors. Democratic societies possessing manufacturing advantages could overwhelm any adversary through mathematical superiority. The bronze memorial shell displayed at Arlington Cemetery bore a simple inscription, in memory of those who served when mathematics met courage and democracy prevailed. The casing, manufactured at Picatinny Arsenal in March 1945, had never been fired, symbolic of the peace achieved through strength that rendered its use unnecessary. American artillery had written victory in mathematics across Pacific battlefields, ensuring that freedom's equation would balance in democracy's favor for generations to come. What is your perspective on this part of history? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every memory and reflection helps keep the past alive.